There is a moment that stays with a surgeon long after the scrub gloves come off. A 71-year-old woman named Margaret came into the emergency room on a Tuesday evening, complaining of stomach cramps, nausea, and a headache so severe she could not stand upright. Her daughter, who had driven her in, kept repeating the same sentence to the triage nurse. She ate the same leftovers she always eats. She reheated them, same as always. Nobody in that waiting room understood why those words mattered, but the attending physician did. And when he called for a consult, the story that unfolded in that examination room changed the way a surgical team thought about something they had assumed was completely harmless. Reheating food, something every household in the world does every single day. Something you probably did this week without a second thought. Here is what nobody tells you. The danger is not always in what you eat. Sometimes the danger is in what you do to food after it has already been cooked. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you are going to look at your refrigerator very differently. The physician telling you this today has spent more than 3 decades operating on the human body. Cardiothoracic surgery. More than 2,000 procedures on the chest cavity, the lungs, the heart. I have held beating hearts in my hands. I have seen the damage that accumulates silently over years of choices that seem completely innocent at the time. And what I have come to understand, standing over an operating table at 2 in the morning while a family waits in another room, is that most of the damage that lands people in my care did not begin with a dramatic event. It began in a kitchen, in a habit, in a meal that seemed perfectly safe because it had been cooked before. The medical community has been slow to address this, not because the science is unclear. The science is actually quite settled, but because telling people that their leftovers could be harming them requires admitting that decades of casual cultural advice, heat it up and eat it, has been dangerously incomplete, especially for you, especially for the body you are living in now, after 60. Here's what changes after 60 that nobody ever explains clearly. Your digestive system, your immune response, your cellular repair mechanisms, they do not operate the way they did at 40. The stomach produces less hydrochloric acid after 60. That acid is not just for digestion. It is your first line of defense against the bacteria and chemical compounds that enter your body through food. When acid levels drop, the body becomes significantly more vulnerable to pathogens that a younger stomach would have neutralized without effort. One study published in a major clinical nutrition journal found that adults over 65 have a 3 to 4 times higher risk of serious complications from foodborne illness than adults under 40. Not slightly higher, 3 to 4 times. Think of it this way. Imagine your immune system is a security team guarding a building. At 40, that team is fully staffed, alert, and fast. At 70, several positions are understaffed, response time is slower, and the team is managing more threats simultaneously. When a compromised food enters that building, the consequences are simply not the same. The same exposure that causes a younger person mild discomfort for a day can put an older adult in the hospital for a week. That is the physiological reality you are working with, and it matters enormously for what comes next. The first food that deserves your full attention is rice. Cooked rice. It sits in nearly every refrigerator in the world, stored in a container, waiting to be reheated tomorrow or the day after. And it is one of the most consistently mishandled foods in domestic kitchens across every culture. Here is the mechanism. Raw rice contains spores of a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. Cooking the rice kills the active bacteria, but the spores survive. When cooked rice is left at room temperature, even for just a few hours, those spores begin to germinate and produce toxins. Here is the part that most people never hear. Reheating the rice does not destroy those toxins. The bacteria themselves may be killed by the heat, but the toxins they have already released into the rice are heat stable. You can bring that rice to a full boil and the toxins remain. You are eating them regardless. For a person over 60 whose stomach acid is already reduced and whose immune system is already managing more baseline inflammation than it was 20 years ago, those toxins can trigger a response that goes well beyond nausea, severe vomiting, dehydration. In more vulnerable individuals, the kind of electrolyte disruption that can stress the heart. Margaret, the woman at the beginning of this story, had eaten reheated rice that had sat on her counter for 2 hours before being refrigerated the night before. 2 hours. That was all it took. Write that down. Rice left at room temperature for more than 1 hour before refrigerating is already compromised. Reheat it once, never twice. And if it has been in the refrigerator for more than 1 day, the risk increases with every hour. The specific fix for rice is this. After cooking, divide it into shallow containers immediately. Not one deep bowl, shallow and wide, so the heat dissipates faster. Get it into the refrigerator within 30 minutes. Reheat it once only, to steaming hot throughout, not just warm on the surface. And consume it within 24 hours of cooking, not 48, not the end of the week, 24 hours. The second food is one that many people over 60 eat regularly because it has been recommended as a heart-healthy protein: chicken. Specifically, reheated chicken that was originally cooked days earlier and stored as a large piece rather than smaller portions. The mechanism here involves two separate dangers. The first is bacterial. Chicken is the most common vehicle for Salmonella and Campylobacter. Both of these pathogens can survive in pockets of undercooked meat, even after the first cooking, particularly in thick cuts where heat does not penetrate evenly. When that chicken is refrigerated and then reheated, if the internal temperature does not reach 165 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the entire piece, those survival pockets remain active. The second danger is less well known. Chicken contains proteins that, when subjected to repeated heating and cooling cycles, undergo a structural change at the molecular level. The proteins denature in ways that make them harder to digest and more inflammatory to the gut lining. For someone over 60, whose gut permeability has already increased with age, a process sometimes called leaky gut, repeatedly reheated chicken protein can contribute to systemic inflammation that accumulates quietly over months and years. You do not feel it as an event. You feel it as fatigue, joint stiffness, brain fog, the kind of symptoms that get attributed to aging when the actual cause is sitting in a Tupperware container in your refrigerator. Here is what nobody tells you about chicken specifically. The way you reheat it matters as much as whether you reheat it. The microwave is the worst possible method for reheating chicken. It heats unevenly, creating hot spots and cold pockets, and it does not restore the protein structure in any meaningful way. The oven, at a low temperature with a small amount of liquid added to prevent drying, is significantly safer. And slicing the chicken into smaller pieces before reheating ensures more even heat distribution throughout. The specific fix: store cooked chicken in pieces, not whole. Reheat in an oven at 325 degrees with a tablespoon of broth or water covering the bottom of the dish. Foil on top for 15 to 20 minutes. Use a meat thermometer every single time. 165 Fahrenheit at the center. Not approximately, exactly. Now, before the third food, there is something you need to understand about what the body is fighting when it encounters compromised food after 60. Because the next item changes the conversation entirely. Most people assume the worst outcome from reheated food is a stomachache. Maybe a bad night. But the connection between chronic low-grade food toxin exposure and cardiovascular inflammation has been documented in clinical literature for more than a decade. The heart does not exist in isolation. Your heart has been working for you every single minute of your life without rest. Every inflammatory signal that enters your bloodstream, whether from a pathogen, a heat-stable toxin, or a destabilized protein, requires your cardiovascular system to respond. That response, repeated over years, is not neutral. It accumulates. And for a body over 60, with arterial walls that are already stiffer, with a cardiovascular system that has less reserve capacity, that accumulation has consequences that do not announce themselves until they are serious. Stay with me. Because the next three foods are where the science becomes very specific. The third food is spinach, and this one surprises almost everyone. Spinach is on the recommended list for nearly every senior health plan. It is high in iron, in folate, in antioxidants, and it is genuinely beneficial when it is fresh. The problem is, what happens to spinach when it is cooked, stored, and reheated? Spinach contains naturally occurring nitrates. When spinach is cooked, bacteria present in the leaves, even after washing, begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. Refrigeration slows this process significantly. Reheating accelerates it dramatically. The nitrites produced in reheated spinach can form compounds called nitrosamines when they interact with the proteins and acids in your digestive system. Nitrosamines are classified as probable human carcinogens. This is not fringe science. This is documented in peer-reviewed nutritional chemistry literature. For a person over 60, whose cellular repair mechanisms are already less efficient and whose body has a longer lifetime of accumulated exposure, the logic of repeatedly reheating spinach and eating it as a regular habit is worth reconsidering seriously. This does not mean spinach is dangerous. It means reheated spinach is a different food than fresh or freshly cooked spinach. The specific fix is simple. Cook spinach in small amounts. Eat it immediately. Do not store cooked spinach for more than 24 hours. And never reheat it more than once. If you have leftover cooked spinach from yesterday, the better choice is to eat it cold in a salad form rather than reheating it. The cold temperature keeps the nitrite conversion significantly slower. The fourth food is eggs, specifically scrambled eggs, omelets, or any egg dish that has been fully cooked and then refrigerated and reheated the next day. Eggs are an excellent protein source, particularly for adults over 60 who need to maintain muscle mass and are often advised to increase protein intake. The complication is that eggs are among the most protein-dense foods you can eat, and protein-rich foods are among the most susceptible to bacterial growth and protein structure degradation when cycled through heat and cold repeatedly. The specific risk with eggs is salmonella contamination. Most people believe that cooking an egg thoroughly eliminates salmonella entirely. It eliminates the bacteria present at the time of cooking. It does not protect against cross-contamination during storage or against any bacteria introduced during the handling of the cooked egg before refrigeration. When a cooked egg dish is stored and then reheated, particularly in a microwave where the center may not reach a safe temperature, the risk profile increases significantly. Beyond bacterial risk, there is a chemical consideration. Eggs contain sulfur-containing amino acids. When eggs are overcooked or subjected to repeated heating, these amino acids break down and release hydrogen sulfide compounds. In small amounts, this is what causes the smell of overcooked eggs. In larger amounts, particularly in a digestive system that is already processing more slowly due to age-related changes, these compounds can irritate the gut lining and contribute to the kind of gastrointestinal distress that is frequently dismissed as a normal part of aging. The specific fix is to cook eggs fresh whenever possible. If you prepare egg dishes ahead, consume them within 12 hours of cooking. Reheat in a covered pan over low heat with a small amount of butter or olive oil, not in a microwave. And never reheat an egg dish that has been refrigerated more than once. The fifth food requires a moment of honesty, because this one is not a single ingredient. It is a category, and it is one that appears at almost every family table, especially in homes where cooking happens in large batches for the week ahead. Potatoes. Cooked potatoes, including boiled potatoes, roasted potatoes, and potato-based dishes like soups and casseroles. Here's the mechanism. Cooked potatoes left at room temperature or cooled slowly in a large covered pot create an ideal environment for the growth of Clostridium botulinum under the right conditions, particularly when wrapped in foil or stored in airtight containers while still warm. This is the bacterium responsible for botulism. At refrigerator temperatures, growth is halted. But the transition period, the time between cooking and refrigeration, is when the danger accumulates. Beyond botulism risk and improper storage, there is a second issue specific to reheated potatoes. Cooked and cooled potatoes develop something called resistant starch. Resistant starch is actually beneficial for gut health in most circumstances. But when potatoes are reheated, particularly to high temperatures, the resistant starch partially converts back, and the rapid glucose release that follows can cause blood sugar spikes that are significantly more pronounced in adults over 60, particularly in those with any degree of insulin resistance, which is extremely common in this age group. For someone managing blood pressure, cardiovascular health, or metabolic concerns, the blood sugar impact of a repeatedly reheated potato dish is not a trivial consideration. It is a direct input into the inflammatory cascade that affects arterial health and cardiac function. The specific fix: cool cooked potatoes quickly by spreading them in a shallow pan rather than leaving them in the pot. Refrigerate within 30 minutes of cooking. Never store potatoes in sealed foil. Reheat once only at a moderate temperature. And be aware that if you are monitoring blood sugar, pairing reheated potatoes with fiber, fat, or protein at the same meal significantly blunts the glycemic response. There is a moment in every surgery when the team is quiet. The monitors are steady, the field is visible, and there is a brief pause before the next critical step. In that pause, I have thought about the patients in my care and the ordinary details of their lives that brought them to this table. A woman who reheated the same spinach 3 nights in a row because she was tired and it was easy. A man who kept a pot of potato soup on the stove for 3 days because his wife was ill and he could not manage much else. A retired teacher who ate reheated chicken from Sunday's cooking every day until Thursday because nobody had told her there was a limit. These were not people who were careless. They were people who had never been given the right information. And that absence of information, multiplied across years, showed up in the results of their tests, their scans, their blood work, and eventually in my operating room. The families waiting outside those rooms deserved to have had this conversation years earlier. That question about what happens to food when you reheat it has stayed with me across every conversation I have had with patients since. It is a simple question, and it has answers that are not complicated. They were just never told. Robert was a 68-year-old retired postal worker who came to me after 2 hospitalizations for cardiac inflammation. His diet had been described by his previous physicians as generally healthy. He cooked his own meals. He ate vegetables. He avoided processed food. What nobody had looked at closely was the way he managed his leftovers. Every Sunday, he cooked a large batch of food for the week. chicken, rice, spinach dishes, potato soup. He reheated portions throughout the week, sometimes reheating the same container multiple times. When we reviewed his food habits in detail, and he made the adjustments outlined above, his inflammatory markers, measured at his 6-month follow-up, had dropped significantly. He reduced from 4 medications to 2. His cardiologist was cautious about attributing the improvement to a single change. But Robert himself was not cautious. He told me, sitting in the follow-up room, that nobody in 30 years of doctor visits had ever asked him how he handled his leftovers. That no one had told him this. That question has stayed with me. It is never too late to make adjustments that your body will respond to. Here is the summary. 5 foods you should stop reheating carelessly, starting tonight. Number 1. Rice. Cool it fast. Refrigerate within 30 minutes. Reheat once only. Eat within 24 hours of cooking. Number 2. Chicken. Store in pieces. Reheat in an oven with moisture. Use a thermometer every time. 165 degrees at the center. Number 3. Cooked spinach. Eat immediately after cooking. Do not reheat. Consume leftovers cold within 24 hours. Number 4. Eggs and egg dishes. Cook fresh when possible. If storing, reheat once, only in a covered pan on low heat. Consume within 12 hours of cooking. Number 5. Potatoes. Cool quickly in a shallow pan. Refrigerate within 30 minutes. Never store in sealed foil. Reheat once only. Pair with fiber or protein to manage blood sugar response. Now here is what I want from you today. Tell me in the comments, which of these 5 surprised you the most? Not just a word. Tell me why. Tell me if this changes something specific in the way you handle your kitchen this week. Those responses matter. They tell me where the information gap is largest and where the next conversation needs to go. If someone in your life needs to hear this, share this with them. Not because the information is alarming, because the adjustments are simple and the benefit is real. A link shared takes 3 seconds. The decision it supports could matter for years. And if you want to be in the room for the next conversation, the subscribe button is right there. Every week, information that your regular medical appointments rarely have time to cover. That is the commitment. One final word. Everything discussed today is based on established nutritional science and clinical observation. It is not a substitute for your personal physician's guidance. Your health history, your medications, your specific conditions, they matter. Use this information as a starting point for a conversation with your doctor, not as a replacement for one. The goal is always to give you more to bring to that conversation, not less reason to have it. Your heart has been working for you every single minute. Give it the support it deserves, starting tonight.